Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for coming to the Asian American Bar Association's panel brought to you by the Women's Committee. And myself and my co-chair, Joan, have brought to you today a very fascinating and superstar panel of AAPI women together to discuss how to navigate gender bias and the bamboo ceiling as AAPI women. I am senior counsel at Kaiser Permanente, and I specialize in data, AI, and technology innovation. And we have worked hard to bring to you today our wonderful panelists. So first, I'd like to introduce Irene Takahashi. Irene has 40 plus years of trial experience. She was both a Superior Court judge of Contra Costa County and also the Deputy District Attorney. She's one of the Bay Area's leading neutrals at ADR Services. And she was also a partner at 3 different law firms and has a wide-ranging experience in the areas of civil disputes, personal injury, landlord-tenant, public-private equity, and liability. We also have Joan Haratani. Joan really doesn't need any introduction because she actually was a prior president of AABA, but most notably, she is a recipient of the very prestigious Margaret Brent Women Lawyer of Achievement Award. She's actually the first woman of color to receive it. She's a partner at Morgan Lewis, and she leads some of the largest mass tort and class action claims with respect to product liability litigation, complex licensing agreements, and trade secret indemnity issues. Joan has a very long list of awards, including top 100 lawyers in California, top 75 women litigator, and one of the 500 most influential Asian Americans. She's also a past governor of NAPABA and also a past president of the Bar Association of San Francisco, first woman of color to hold that position. We also have with us Vivian Kim. Vivian is EVP General Counsel, Corporate Secretary, and also Chief People Officer of Hanmi Bank. She's also a board member of Koreatown Youth and Community Center and a board member and former president of the Korean American Bar Association of Southern California Foundation. We also have Jennifer Chow Bevan, who is an executive coach and facilitator and founder of Path Relaunch. She's worked with over hundreds of senior leaders across diverse industries, including Facebook, Instagram, Gilead Sciences, NBC Universal, and Murad. She's very committed to diversity, equity, and inclusion, and she likes to focus her support of both women, BIPOC, and AAPI leaders. Her business experience includes roles in investment banking, JP Morgan, A.T. Kearney, and Bain & Co., and also Neutrogena Corporation. So we are so privileged to have this megastar panel of women, at least 100 years, maybe 120 years of experience amongst them. So, and we're here to talk about, frankly, some of the issues that are really important to AAPI women that we've all experienced throughout our careers. And so we're harnessing all their collective energy and experience. So we're going to touch on topics such as the model minority, the 2 stereotypes that AAPI women face, Wallflower and Dragon Lady, and also the bamboo ceiling. And I'm going to explain each of these concepts when I ask the questions. So the first question we're going to discuss is, oftentimes we're brought up in the Asian culture and also the Western culture, and we're 100% of each. But as we enter into the workforce, it really is the Western culture that influences our progression. And often many of us learn to code switch. But it's an interesting dynamic because on the Eastern culture side of things, there's a emphasis on humility, harmony, deference to elders. There's obviously the model minority myth and stereotype, which is basically work hard, don't complain, suck it up, and hopefully the powers to be will recognize your work. So there's this concept of merit-based system. And then in terms of if you compare that to Western culture, corporate culture operations and things that are valued for leadership, it's about being outspoken, about being visible, presenting opposing ideas, which is actually an interesting conflict with our Eastern culture upbringing. So I'd like to put it to the panel of women, and Joan, maybe you can start us off in terms of how you navigated this kind of Eastern-Western culture dynamic.
Well, thanks, Belinda, and it's thrilling to be with all of you virtually, and thank you again to our fabulous audience for spending their evening with us. I know all of you are running around busy and have many things to do, so thank you for spending time listening to us. So I think this is really what diversity, equity, and inclusion is all about, right? It's about mixing different cultures and drawing on the strengths of cultures. And we're in America. And I graduated from law school having no clue how to act, how to conduct myself in a majority law firm in Oakland, California, having no role models in my family, certainly to do so. So what were my choices? My choices were to take the best of Asian culture, take the best of my upbringing as a Japanese American woman, and be who I am. And also, as Belinda said, it's kind of a little bit of code switching, of watching, listening, and observing, and seeing the qualities that were working and were successful for the majority folks in my firm, and how I could enhance those qualities by playing to my strengths, like being respectful, being courteous, saying thank you, listening, being empathetic. And so I feel that in my own view, I was a value add because I had a slightly different approach to legal problems. I had a slightly different approach, I thought, to interacting with people, because in my day, there were so very few of us. I mean, I'm old. So for me, I think there's a beautiful chance, especially now in 2021, to embrace different cultures and take the best of all of the cultures, not just my own as a Japanese American woman, but all the cultures, the ones I admire, and take those traits and replicate them in the work environment. So those are my thoughts for now.
Jennifer or Vivian?
Yeah, I mean, I love what Joan is saying, because I think, we hear people talking a lot about imposter syndrome, and I think you feel like an imposter when you're not being true to yourself, right? If you're trying too hard to emulate other people. And so I think it's find out who you are, how do you want to show up authentically, and then also build some awareness of maybe where some deficits are. And I'll give you an example. Coming out of business school, I worked for Bain, and I was very much okay, I'm just going to put my head down, work really hard, and the work is going to speak for itself. And I learned pretty quickly that that's just not how it works, and I think when we internalize the model minority myth, what happens is we also start believing in the meritocracy myth. And in the workplace, the meritocracy isn't always the way it works, right? And so I remember being in a meeting once, and a partner actually pulled me aside and gave me some feedback. And he said, I've noticed that you sometimes are quiet when other people are talking about their projects, and you're kind of like, you have a point of view on your piece. But he's like, I know you have an idea, and I know you have things you want to contribute that maybe aren't aligned with your work stream. And he's like, we want to hear your voice. And that was a light bulb moment for me, where I was like, oh, wait, here is a person in a position of authority actually encouraging me and giving me permission to speak up about things that maybe normally I would have waited to speak, or waited my turn. And so that was actually a turning point where I had to unlearn some of my own narratives around how I was raised, right? The whole humility thing and not speaking, out of turn or being afraid to make a mistake. So I think it's both. It's like know yourself, but also know when maybe there are things that we've grown up with where we've conditioned ourselves to behave a certain way. And what are the things that we can give ourselves permission to let go of, like things that don't really serve us anymore.
Yeah, and I definitely echo what Jen is saying. I had the exact same experience actually when I was a very junior associate. One of the partners I was working with said that if he didn't want my opinion, then he wouldn't have me on the team, that there's no benefit of having an additional person on the team if all you're doing is just directing their work, that he wants to hear any opinions that I have, whether right or wrong, that it'll trigger other things that he was thinking about or may think about other kind of ways to go about a problem, and that was really the value add in having a team supporting him for these cases, instead of just having himself as kind of the sole person that was allowed to have an opinion. And I similarly had this kind of light bulb moment of, this person who has been practicing as long as I've been alive really cares about what I, first or second year associate, what I have to add to the case. So that was actually great.
And Irene, I know you had progressed through your career, different careers actually. Maybe you could enlighten us with your journey and some of the lessons learned through navigating those different cultures.
Yeah, thank you. I will tell you that I've been kicked out. If you can see me, that's fine, but I can't see you, so I'm just going to talk.
We can see you.
Okay, great. All right. So Joan said that she was old. Joan and I have already discussed this. I'm 7 years older, so don't listen to her. The point, what I'm trying to make is that, I think it's really important for us to be ourselves, advocating for ourselves, but know yourself and be honest with yourself. As a child in elementary school, I would always get a satisfactory mark in what they called citizenship because I never raised my hand. I never spoke up. I knew the answers, but I didn't want to risk being wrong. That happened all the way through law school. Okay. But what I want to get across is we're talking about the bamboo ceiling. Just be sure that you're not creating your own ceiling.
Yeah.
Know your worth, work hard, take the advice of people that you admire and respect, but always be yourself. If you're not the ball buster type, don't try to be what you're not. When I was a DA starting out, we had a mentor. He was a hard charging guy. He could raise his voice and demand this and demand that. And I tried to emulate that. It didn't work. It wasn't me. You've got to be true to yourself and advocate for yourself. As I was growing up, I have to share with you, I was born in San Francisco, but before I started school, my dad got his job in Oakland. So we moved across the bay to El Cerrito, and I was moved into what was a white community, but there were maybe 40% of the families on our block were Asian, and it was 1954. And at that time, there were many people that would not sell or rent to Asian people, specifically Japanese Americans, because of World War II. And in World War II, as you all should know, Japanese Americans and Japanese, people of Japanese ancestry, were incarcerated for doing nothing wrong. And as a child, I didn't understand the whys and wherefores. I just knew that my parents didn't do anything wrong, and yet they were put in jail. So it created sort of self-consciousness and insecurity as I grew up in primarily a white community. And all I ever wanted to do was to fit in and not be mistreated like my parents. So I learned to get good grades, work hard. And as other speakers have already said, you were kind of waiting and hoping that people in power would recognize your hard work and reward you with more salary or advancement. And I came to understand, I never, in all the times I worked, all those years, 44 years as an attorney, I never asked for a better salary. Who do I have to blame? Myself. But that was my style. And I think I got to where I was by working hard and taking advantage of opportunities. And like I said, listening to the advice of people that you respect. Don't hold yourself back, though. Too many times people said, well, you should do this or you should try for that. And I said, yeah, okay, I will. And I did. And I usually got what I wanted, but I held myself back. So don't make this mistake I did. Don't hold yourself back. Know your value and advocate for yourself. Thank you.
I love that. I love that, Irene. And I can second the fact that it's not always a meritocracy. Certainly, I remember as a junior associate working late on Friday nights and probably be the only one there, and then end up with the assignments that partners gave that went over the weekend. And while others went out to drinks and yoga, and I'm like, oh, okay, well, maybe this is not working out. And so it wasn't until I spoke up for myself, I made sure that I conveyed ideas. I seeked to understand and then to be understood. That then it became, I was making my value more obvious rather than waiting for others to speak on my behalf. So let's talk a little bit. I was making my value more obvious rather than waiting for others to speak on my behalf. So let's talk a little bit. I was making my value more obvious rather than waiting for others to speak. Hear me? Sorry, for some reason there was a playback just now. Can you hear me fine?
Now, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
great.
I thought
We're gonna have you on loop for an hour.
Exactly.
You don't want that.
This is morphing into karaoke.
Groundhog Day. So let's talk a little bit about the two stereotypes that Asian women often get. You know, it's interesting because we live at essentially an intersection of both race and gender. And what that means is that we experience the stereotypes of both race and gender. And so when you're living at the intersection, it means you're both highly visible. You're visible because, you know, it's obvious you're a woman and you're Asian, but your challenges are invisible. And so the challenge is to make those challenges visible. So the two stereotypes that we often get caught between, and we did also see some of that during the Atlanta shootings, is the quiet wallflower that's deferential, doesn't speak up. And then when you start speaking up and you're on that journey, then you quickly hit the dragon lady, sharp elbows, aggressive stereotype. And neither of which are us. But because oftentimes these are the stereotypes presented in the media, these stereotypes are imposed upon us. And it's very easy for people to assume that. And Atlanta was a very good example of that, where it was an intersection of, you know, the exotic wallflower Asian woman. And so I'd like to explore that a bit more with both Irene and Joan as to how you navigated these two stereotypes. And so I'd like to explore in that respect. Joan, did you want to start? As to how you...
Sure, I'm happy to. And that's a great question. I'm so glad you asked it, Belinda, because I think it's super, super, super relevant. And I think that one of my touchstones and my advice for all of you is to remember why you're here. Why are you at your job? Why are you at your place of employment? For me, as a law firm, it was to serve my clients and become an excellent lawyer. So I thought, okay, so I know you also can't go through life in a bubble with blinders on and pretending like you're in a complete meritocracy and that everyone is going to be treated the same, right? So you have to be very realistic about how you're being perceived. And when you feel that there are stereotypes being thrown at you, again, ground yourself on why you're there. If people are assuming that I am really good at research, but I don't have the front room skills to argue the motion, I will say to my supervisor, and I wrote the summary judgment motion, I would like to argue it. Just be who you are. Again, why was I there? I was there to serve my client. I was there to win the motion. I knew the facts and the law better than anyone, having taken the depositions and written the motion. Therefore, I was the most qualified person to argue the motion. So again, following along, one of the themes is show up confident, show up clear with your mission, why you're there, why you have this job, why you are being paid, because you are of value. You deserve a seat at the table. You deserve a voice. You deserve every opportunity you can grab. So know that you're out there in a world where there are stereotypes every which way, always, with everybody, right? Everyone's got these implicit subliminal biases. Blink, Malcolm Gladwell talks about, in a blink of an eye, we assess people in like a microsecond. So know that that's true. Okay, so you can spend the rest of your life reacting or imagining or being afraid of all of those things, or you can just show up clear. And it's hard because you're growing as a lawyer, you're growing in confidence, you're learning so much every day. But if you're coming from a stable, strong foundation, and that's the self-love, the working on yourself, the accepting yourself, the confidence, the being authentic, then I think it's easier to show up 100% as you and ask for what you want. You want to be the person taking the lead. You want to be the person at trial. You want to be the person going to the client pitch, and you want credit for that too. So I think that's kind of it's not a head-on response. I mean, you can't exactly say, oh, I get it. You're thinking I'm a dragon lady and I'm just too ambitious. And I've had many people call me, gosh, you're aggressive. Gosh, you're ambitious. And I'm like, ding, 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 ding. You know, I know what that's about. We're going to be talking about microaggressions later. But again, if I'm clear on my purpose, then all of that kind of is a distraction, and I will not be distracted from my purpose. So I hope that's helpful.
No, that's amazing. You're like inspiring me to go out and and do things already. And we've got Irene coming back in.
Sorry.
Irene, no problem. We can definitely hear you and see you. And so we were just talking about navigating the two stereotypes, wallflower and dragon lady. And in preparation, you had some thoughts. So I was thinking, would you like to share them with us?
Yeah, you know, I don't like any of those, obviously. I suffered from a self-image of being shy, which I don't think is a wallflower. You know, it was just, as I said before, I was too afraid to make a mistake. I was too afraid of saying something wrong, of standing out. So it's sort of like I think Jennifer said, it's just, you know, speak up. And what I would like to encourage people to do, rather than spending so much time, wasting time worrying about what other people think of you, just think of this. I'm a valuable person and I have ideas that I want to share. Takes the onus off you and you're just sharing ideas. So the dragon lady is very offensive. I think we women are often sexualized way too much. And the only thing I have to say about that is kind of piggyback on what said before, be careful of people in power that want to help you, question their motives. That's all I want to say about it. Okay.
Can I jump in too? So I think yes to everything Joan and Irene have said, and I think it's really important that we recognize the systems around us that are oppressive, right? Yes, it's the onus on us, but I don't want our viewers to think that it's only on us, because there are systems that are in place that are not fair. And it is, you know, I coach a lot of women of color, people of color, and it is exhausting to have to walk that tightrope of wanting to be likable and not wanting to come across as too aggressive. Or, you know, I've seen performance reviews of so many underrepresented people where it's the qualitative feedback is always around style, whereas the white leader gets, oh, he's a wonderkin. He is perfect for this role. He can see around corners. He is the perfect leader. And whereas the Asian woman gets, well, she doesn't have presence. And so I think we have to also have the courage to challenge some of these systems. And not all feedback is valid. We don't have to accept all feedback. We can ask questions. We can probe. And so that's kind of how I think about this, is like when we notice that something doesn't feel right, yeah, how do we get the courage to have a dialogue about it and speak up and maybe even gently, challenge it, or bring it to someone's attention, because, we're all on our journey around diversity and inclusion, and not everyone is as far along on their journeys. So some people need to be educated in a way that can help them grow, right? And I know we're going to talk about how to do it, but I kind of am of the mindset now, whereas before I would laugh it off. If somebody made a microaggression to me, I might have like, ha ha ha. Now I have tools where I can say, okay, I'm going to call this person in and try to help them understand why that's hurtful.
Right. And Jennifer, I 100% agree. And I think part of it is incumbent on us to do things like, when you are in the room and you're the only one that looks like you, and other people are like talking over you, to say something.
Yeah.
To say something. And to say something loudly and persistently. Don't just say it in my ideas about this motion. Don't do that. Say, my idea about this motion is threefold. 1, 2, 3. Ignore. Can I return to what I just said? You see what I'm saying? Because you are an advocate for clients, therefore advocate for yourself as a client in the room.
And
Be
how do you
advocate?
And how do you amplify if you're noticing it happening to someone else in the room, another person of color, another marginalized person? How do you advocate for them and amplify their voices? Exactly.
And if you could make a deal with that person ahead of time, I'm going to support when you say X. And please support when I say whatever I say, right? And then you've got somebody, a tag team, saying, I 100% agree with Jennifer. I absolutely, and I have this idea too. And suddenly the stereotypes are being blown up right in front of your very eyes. And that moment can be a life-changing experience for people who didn't even know maybe consciously they had the stereotype, yet they did.
No, that's perfect segue. And I'm a big believer in holding space for people, including obviously centering on Asian women voices, because so often that I see people are interrupted. In fact, our female Supreme Court justices actually say that they're 3 times more interrupted than their male colleagues.
Really?
And so oftentimes, if in a meeting that I'm facilitating, if I see someone being interrupted, I'd be like, well, let's go back to what Jane was saying or Jennifer was saying. Or if I see an idea stolen by someone else, I'd be like, well, what a great idea, Vivian. Would you like to partner with Bob on this? And so it just gives credit where credit is due. But this is a perfect segue to our other question, which is about microaggressions and micro-invalidations. Microaggressions are things when, you feel like there's a statement made, maybe an action taken, and oftentimes you're like not sure if that person was intentionally doing something that may be either gender bias or racial bias. And then a micro-invalidation is actually when you bring up a concern and you're told, oh, it's not too bad. Or for example, oh, that's not racism, or oh, you're being too sensitive. So I'd love to hear from others like Vivian or Irene and also, of course, Joan and Jennifer, about when did you experience microaggressions and micro-invalidations? How did you deal with it? And also importantly, like when did you decide to call someone in or call someone out? Because sometimes I think that's also a bit of a judgment call too.
Yeah, so if I could start, I think as a lawyer, to be in law school was the first time that I really experienced a microaggression of this kind, where I had applied for a diversity fellowship with a law firm. And I remember I was talking to somebody in class before the class had started, and somebody from who I wasn't directing my comment to, a white male, commented, "Oh, Vivian, you qualify for a diversity, fellowship?" And I was like, yes, I am a female and I'm Asian, so I definitely qualify for a diversity fellowship. But I was kind of at a loss at that time to say anything more about it or to address that question more directly, that individual later. But, as I've become more comfortable, I think, in the organizations that I'm a part of, I've definitely seen how sometimes it's just about education. And I do recognize that some people, depending on their background, might just not see why a comment like that would be offensive or a problem. And so instead of, I think Jen kind of mentioned this earlier, you know, there's a time and a place of how you approach these people so they don't become too defensive and kind of accepting that message and internalizing it. So I've often found that depending on how I interpret their comment, whether or not it was intended in a way to really be offensive or not, I will try to take them aside separately to have a one-on-one conversation as to why it really wasn't appropriate in that setting and how they could address those issues better in the future. And to me, that first step, you know, I let them kind of mull it over and fix their behavior on their own before kind of escalating it somewhere else.
Jennifer, Joan.
I think sometimes, you know, I want to assume good intent, right? But I think sometimes people don't know what they're saying might be offensive. I mean, I've been told by people, oh, you don't seem Asian. And they're saying it in a way that's supposed to be a compliment, which is so messed up. And I know why. And they're saying that because I don't, to them, seem like a typical Asian stereotype because I am more outspoken and extroverted. Who knows what they mean? But the problem is the impact, it lands on me in a way that's very hurtful and it feels very offensive. So I think, you know, helping someone see, I know you probably didn't mean to say this in a hurtful way, but the way it impacted me was it felt XYZ, right? So people can't argue with you when you say it felt this way. Mm-hmm. This was my experience of what you just said, right? And then if they do invalidate you, then that's like gaslighting, which right. Asians get gaslit a lot when we're told we don't experience racism or we don't. So I think we just have to keep not allowing it to happen, you know? I mean, I've had friends tell me, you're not a person of color. What do you think I am? Like, that's crazy that you would even say that. And that's, you know, of course we're people of color. We face lots of barriers, so.
I love that. And I love just, you know, when you express your own opinion, I felt this way. It's not accusatory. It's saying your behavior made me feel this way. How can anyone dispute how you feel? So use a lot of I words. I felt this way. I felt humiliated. I felt not heard. I felt bad. Kind of ruined my day. Those are all fair ways to express yourself. Think about what you want to say ahead of time. And I also think that it's very important for us living in a world of microaggressions and stereotypes to understand what's being thrown at us and how people are thinking of us as API women or as anyone of whoever you are, fill in the blank. It's all, you know, it's just these assumptions that aren't true. So for me, one of the assumptions was, as a younger attorney, that I'm an Asian woman and Japanese American, therefore timid, therefore not able to articulate myself, therefore not confident, you know, fill in the blank, like dominoes. So what I did is I sought out and spent a lot of time increasing my public speaking skill set. So I had a lot of arrows in my quiver, so I knew how to conduct myself given a situation, whether it be a board meeting or a trial or an internal meeting or a client pitch. So I cannot recommend more highly, but to spend time away from work. I love Kara Hale Alter. Shout out to my girl, Kara Hale Alter, who does speechskills.com, a book. She has videos on LinkedIn, which are fabulous, short tidbits that are super helpful, in-person training. I have spent a lot of time working on just phonetics, pacing, volume, facial expression, all of that. And I found that to be incredibly helpful. People take notice of you, especially when I was bar president. I gave so many speeches. So I thought, if I'm going to give speeches, people better be able to understand what I'm saying. Otherwise, what's the point? So the more airtime you spend, the more time you spend practicing your on the feet skills, you know, talking into a video, watching yourself, it's extremely painful, usually humiliating. I would do that on the weekend, then recover. So you just get so much better at it, and then it becomes second nature, and then it becomes fun. And as a lawyer, I felt as a litigator, that is part of my job, to communicate and to persuade. And if my lack of confidence or my anger at the microaggression that someone just threw at me was tripping me up, then that wasn't a good thing. So the last part I will say is try not to take it personally. It's very easy to get depressed. It's very easy to get angry. It's very easy to retreat because it's hurtful.
Yeah.
And it makes you feel unseen and unheard, and it's unfair. And then you just go down that rabbit hole of, this is crappy, right? Yeah. So rather than spend all that, I spent way too much energy as a young lawyer doing all that stuff. Spend that energy on building you, on falling in love with you, on making you better for your job and for your life, because it's gonna have a ripple effect in a profound way, not only in your job, but really for you, because this is your one life.
Take the power back. Don't give power to those right? I love what you're saying, Joan.
You know, I think if you're going to talk to someone, I think it's really important to not only choose your battles, but consider very carefully the time, place, and manner. And I think we've all experienced this, and I know it to be a fact. Whoever they are, don't want us to be aggressive. They want us to be assertive. So my mother used to always say, you can say anything you want, but watch your choice of words and your tone. Don't turn them off by jumping on them. It's like you hear on TV, they're talking about trying to convince people to get COVID vaccines. You don't hit them over the head with a sledgehammer. Right. You bring them along. You ask them, you said that, what did you mean? Because this is how I experienced it.
Yep. Right? Some of the best advice, ironically, I got as a first-year associate from a client. And she said, always remember, and she was just giving me life advice. She was an older woman, very, very maternal. And she said, always remember that it's much easier to get by with a spoonful of honey than with a gallon of vinegar. And I've never forgotten that. It's just really great advice. To Irene's point of word choice is very important because words matter.
Yeah. And tone also. That's my style. That's how it worked for me. I mean, other people, maybe because I'm way older than everybody else, you got to understand the situation was so different when I started. Men could actually say to women, you can't be a partner if you have children. It was not even actionable back in the Stone Age.
I remember that.
Right? So now at least we've gone to law school with guys, maybe they're married to women that are attorneys. So that makes it more palatable. But still, honestly, when I left my firm 6 years ago, the people in power were younger, but they still had the same attitudes. So
can I just, I don't want to disagree with either one of you because I do agree. And I also want to just know, we want to be careful not to tone police. Because if someone says something racist or microaggressive, really, they need to be held accountable. And so I just want to make sure, like sometimes I think our model minority behavior gets in the way where we want to be really accommodating and nice, and we don't want to hurt their feelings. We don't want them to be uncomfortable. So I just think we need to also be aware when maybe we might be doing that as well.
For sure. I mean, I don't think we're saying at all, don't just let people slide. Yeah. Because you can't do that. But I think it's a strategic question as to what words would be the most effective. Yeah. And what tone is the most effective. And it depends on the audience. It depends on the individual. One person you can be brutally honest with, and the other person you might have to be a little
kid gloves.
Yeah, exactly. A little kid glovey.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that goes so much to social awareness, like situational awareness, and also self-awareness. And we're going to talk a bit more about mental health and resilience too. But so much of this, I think, is a mental thing, right? Like managing ourselves is 40% of a mental thing. And I mean, Irene, to your point about really just showing up whole, I find really basic things like sleep, and well, for me, meditation. I know, John, you're going to talk a little bit about therapy, but even just putting yourself in the right place so that you can be cognizant of your environment and of yourself, and then be able to make those choice words, right? So that people's reactions or your reactions to others are intentional. So we had gone into this a little bit, but what advice would you give to your younger self or the junior to mid attorneys, especially, you know, as it relates to being an AAPI woman, but also as it relates to the bamboo ceiling, which is this other concept of where really, you know, Asian women are really well represented in the individual contributor category, and also in like mid-level management. But as you look up into senior management and further up, there are very few of us. And so it's called the bamboo ceiling. I've also heard it actually referenced as the cement ceiling for women, because for AAPI women and women of color, because we can't see through the glass ceiling to see someone like us on the other side in a senior executive position. So what advice would you give to our audience about navigating the bamboo ceiling, or advice in general?
This is advice to younger lawyers, yeah? Or
yeah.
Younger women.
I think really owning your career and your career path, right? Like, it's not, someone else isn't going to be saying, oh, Vivian, you should get this next opportunity because it's going to help you grow. You have to design those alliances with your manager or mentor, seek sponsors, seek mentors, really find those advocates, like build your own internal board of directors so you can go get advice and seek help and get coaching. But I think it's, you know, really looking at your career as like, what are the skills I want to be getting? How do I need to push myself to grow? How do I get out of my comfort zone? What are the ways I might be getting in my own way? So it's really early on, not just waiting for things to happen to you or assuming that just because you're working hard that you're going to get, you know, rewarded for that.
Yeah, and Jennifer mentioned the whole, you know, mentor sponsor terms, and just for those who haven't heard them yet, you know, a mentor is somebody who can give you advice about your career or different things that are happening to you, and a sponsor is somebody who is willing to really put something of theirs on the line for you to push you forward. So their reputation or the power that they may have in a certain group to kind of push along your career. And so you need some of both, right? You often need many mentors in different areas who can provide you a lot of good advice. Like Jen said, you know, like a internal kind of board of directors, right? Or some advisory council that you can lean on for different things. And then oftentimes within the organization, if you have a sponsor, it's really great because that person will really go to bat for you and kind of help you see through maybe that cement, hopefully not cement, but bamboo ceiling or a glass ceiling, to help you kind of push you to the other side, and someone you trust to really throw back and forth ideas about, you know, how maybe you should conduct yourself in a certain different kind of power structure than you're used to. And one thing that I would echo that was told to me, but I really did experience, is that when you look for a sponsor or mentor, they don't have to look like you, right? The biggest sponsor when I was at the law firm was a white male, like the same partner that told me that I should speak up my mind. I mean, he really did help me kind of navigate and give me insight into what the power structure at a firm really was. You know, as an associate, I think it's really hard to understand the relationship between the different levels of partners at a firm. What does it really mean to be an equity partner? You know, all the things that they don't teach you in law school, but is really important in actual practice. So I would feel free to kind of build that trusted bank of people that you can go to for advice.
I agree with that. And I also echo some of my most powerful mentors and sponsors have been majority men and women to help me navigate the environment that I'm in. And I think it's also important to remember that you don't need just one mentor and one sponsor. At any given point in time, even now, I probably have 10 to 20 mentors. maybe 5 sponsors. And some people are people I go to if I have issue A. Then if I have issue Y, I go to a separate person. So I think that's important to remember as well.
What I would say to the younger attorneys, oftentimes you'll be going through performance reviews. Do not allow another person's opinion to determine your value as a person or as an attorney. All right. Then think about what success means to you. Is it money? Is it position, power, prestige? Right? And then I've always worked with a 5-year plan. I like to have a goal, right? I don't consciously work towards it every step I take, but if you have a goal and it's a realistic goal, right? Then every small decision you make gets channeled. And it's worked for me, but it's good to have a purpose and a goal and to work towards that. But I've heard a very, very bright coverage attorney once say to me, a woman, if you get told you're stupid enough times, you start believing it, which is sort of an exaggerated example. But what I'm saying is, you work hard, you know your value. If you're not being recognized as you think you should, don't let their determination define you. And quite frankly, if you get to a point where things are getting in your way, get out of there. Have the courage to get out of there, because frankly, when I thought about changing law firms, I was honest with myself. What makes me think they're going to be any different? Right? Easy thing to do for some people, not so easy determined by your personal circumstances and finances. All right. But that's what I'm saying. Don't let other people determine your value. That alone is empowering.
I think
agree.
that's great advice. I also have one more thing that I wanted to mention before we move on from this topic. It's, while it's great to look kind of above you in terms of experience for the mentors and sponsors, I also think it's really important to build kind of your level, a network of people that you trust. I have a bunch of friends from either law school or from practice as a junior associate and we've all kind of just grown up together, and you often end up at different places. So now I'm in-house and they're still at a firm, and I often think to myself that I'm in such a great place right now being in-house to give work to people that I know from other facets of my life or my practice, right? So I've been very involved in bar associations throughout the last decade or so, and it's a great way to build meaningful relationships and have something more to go to than just sending out an email to somebody being like, hey, you do this kind of law, like, can you handle my case? It's better if I actually have some direct exposure to them beforehand. And as a person in-house, for any of those who are in-house, I think you really should own that power that you have in-house as a client to give work to the folks that are other minority attorneys at firms. I often say to my mentees, if you have a chance to do it, and it's the same for the company, you have a ton of more than a ton of people who are in our communities that are very capable, and it's great to be able to recognize them, and you as a client have all the power in terms of delegating the credit for your matters and who works on your cases. I didn't actually realize how much power I had until maybe 2 or 3 years into being in-house. But whatever you say goes. So make sure you harness all of that power and know that that exists when you're making those decisions.
No, that's wonderful. And we have this great question from Joy, actually. Her question is, what if you're at a firm or in an environment whereby mentors and sponsors don't look like you? How would you approach that question with a partner?
I think that's a great question. So I found my mentor or sponsor at the firm basically through a relationship that I developed. So it wasn't like I just went to one of the, rainmaking partners and said, will you be my sponsor? It was, after I'd worked with him on a couple of cases. And I think it's very much like a give and take relationship. Even though it sounds like a mentor or sponsor is the one giving you all the advice and helping you out, it's actually more of a give and take. So you usually are in that same group, or you work on those cases with them. So you provide that level of support for their work. And so they see that value in you and want you to grow and stay with the company. So then they will take on this additional role of being a great mentor and a sponsor. And so I would encourage you to look closely first to see the folks who are somebody who is already in your network within the firm that you might lean on, and then kind of work organically to build on that relationship and then make that ask.
I think oh, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, I think sometimes we overlook how important relationship building is. Like that's part of the work. It's not just, writing the briefs or doing the work, but the relationships and getting to know people, networking, because, someone's not going to want to be your mentor or sponsor if they don't really believe, if they don't see something in you that they want to sponsor, right? So they need to get to know you. And that also includes, sometimes you have to be a little vulnerable and ask for support where you need it. Ask questions. Don't be afraid to maybe ask for help even. And I think sometimes we hold ourselves back from that because we might feel like it makes us look weak, or it makes us look like we don't know the answer to something. But I think that's part of building trust, is having the courage to sometimes ask a question or admit you don't know someone and ask for help. So I see that as part of it too.
And I'm a firm believer also in building common bonds, even though no one at your work environment might look just like you. Mm-hmm. Think about the traits that you want to develop as a lawyer. Think about who you want to be as a lawyer. What does an excellent lawyer mean to you? And maybe find somebody with those traits. Again, it is relationship building. Law is a relationship business. The legal profession is a small village. Everybody knows everybody. And one of the great things about AABA is that we are a family of people who are committed to supporting each other. So get all of your friends to join AABA. And remember that your AABA family will always have your back.
Well, speaking of mentorships and AABA, I was very, very pleased about 3 years ago to be paired up. AABA asked, does anyone want to be a mentor? And I thought, well, I'm not in a law firm anymore. I've got some extra time. If someone thinks I can be a mentor, okay. So I signed up for one-on-one. And I just said goodbye after 3 years of being a mentor/friend to a delightful young woman that just took the DC bar. She went to Berkeley Law and she's got a job waiting for her in DC. We became, if you want to call mentor-mentee, but when I met her, I said, this woman does not need a mentor. We became the best of friends. And I was old enough, I'm sort of the age between her parents and her grandma. So I became a family away from home because her family's in South Korea. But it was so rewarding, and I've never done it. I'd love to do it again because I'm in a position now that I see job openings. And if someone that I meet, say they're looking for something, I try to get to know them. The people that I know from my litigation experience are in those power hiring positions. So I've placed about 5 people already, and I actually enjoy doing it. So it's very rewarding to be a mentor. Don't think you're imposing on people. They'll be flattered. They'll be flattered if you ask.
And our president, Michelle Park Chu, who is also my dear friend and partner, she created a mentor program for AABA, and we have a Pathways to Partnership program, which I think we're just kicking off again next month. So stay tuned for more on that.
Yeah. And I would just like to say that if you get paired up in these programs, because I've been in a couple of these myself, please, 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 as a mentee, reach out to your mentor. They only signed up because they actually want to do this, and you're definitely not imposing. But oftentimes people get busy, so they forget to reach out to you. But if you reach out to them, they'd be more than happy to take the time for a call, or, once maybe COVID is over, a coffee or a lunch or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, I second the idea of taking the initiative. I actually have random folks reach out to me on LinkedIn all the time, just wanting to catch a half an hour, get some advice because they're moving into law or, other areas of interest. And more often than not, we just want to give back. So certainly feel free to do that. And then just to touch on the resilience piece of this. So the journey obviously is long, right? And we talked about building support in terms of our peers and also folks above us. But how do you stay resilient and positive in this journey, right? Because you're bombarded by a lot of things. And perhaps, we can start with Joan, and you can talk about a little bit about what's helped you along the way.
Yeah, thank you. Happy to. So when I was growing up in the law, which was in the 80s, there was a saying that, preserve your strength because a legal career is like a marathon. And I actually don't agree with that. I think it's more like a series of sprint races with rests in between. So pace yourself. Part of it is pacing yourself and knowing your own limits, making sure you get enough sleep, try to be healthy, try to get some exercise. All of those basic things, believe it or not, the things your folks told you and your grandparents told you, they hold true. So that's part of it. Another thing that really helped me was getting therapy. And I started therapy when I was a first-year associate in 1984. At that time, it was not a cool thing to do. I think now it's a requirement of California resident. It's a California residency requirement, as far as I can tell. But in the day, it was almost shameful, especially coming from my cultural background. No one got therapy. No one did that. But I found my father had just passed away very young, and I just had a lot of negative tapes in my head. So I found that my low self-esteem, if you can believe it, and my timidness were getting in the way of job performance. So I started to go to therapy, and my close circle of friends at my firm would often joke to me over the years and say, you could have bought that Mercedes, but instead. And then when I made partners, they're like, okay, you could have had a fleet of Mercedes, Joan. But I think, look at Simone, Biles, look at Michael Phelps, look at so many, Naomi Osaka, all these people who they're like superhuman, and yet guess what? They're human. We all have breaking points. We all need help. The mentor sponsorship world and AABA is all about coming together and helping each other and building friendships and relationships of trust. So I think that if you're stumbling with an issue, even if you go for like a few months or 6 months or a year, it's when you break a bone, you go to a doctor. When you have a spiritual issue and you need some help because you find yourself on a continuous loop of negative self-talk, I would suggest you step out of that loop for a second and try to find somebody who can help you break that record so that you can spend your time and energy on things that are positive, fun, and that propel your life forward rather than having you look in the rearview mirror. I don't want people to go home and do what I did. Oh, why did I do that? I blew it. I made a mistake. I should have answered the interrogatory that way. Why didn't I answer this question ask this question at the deposition? Like all this negative self-talk, and it just got in the way of really my enjoying my job and my life. Mm-hmm. So creating joy by just being honest with who you are and accepting of who you are, I think goes a long way to being happy. And when you're happy, it's amazing the blows you can take because you are resilient, because you have confidence in yourself and self-love, and you've built this amazing network with your AABA family and your own sponsors and mentors, right?
Mm-hmm. Jennifer, I think you were trying to say something.
Oh, no, I agree. I mean, I agree with everything Joan said. And I would add, again, it's about being willing and vulnerable to reach out to talk about these things, whether it's with, a friend, a peer, a coach, a therapist. I mean, and I think especially as Asian women, and especially in the last year with the surge in anti-Asian racism, I mean, I've found some I've grown so much just working with an Asian therapist, just in terms of like unpacking my own experience with racism and my own trauma and like my conditioned thinking from being raised by immigrants, all that. It's been really healing for me. But the other thing about resilience, in fact, I just facilitated a women's leadership group last night, and we spent the 2 hours discussing this, the inner critic voice, the talk track. And one thing that came up around resilience is we have to give ourselves permission to say no too, and to set boundaries. Because oftentimes when you're doing I'm just going to put my head down and work, what happens is we say yes to everything because we're in proving mode. We're trying so hard to prove our worth. And we don't realize that actually leads to burnout. It prevents us from actually really kind of protecting our time and thinking about what is it I want to be doing, right? So I think getting comfortable sometimes with saying no. You know, Belinda, you were talking about how you were getting staffed on Friday nights doing stuff when everyone else was going out. Like, how do you get to the point where you have courage to say, you know what? No, I'm not. I'm actually busy. I can't do that, without the fear that it's going to completely derail your career, because chances are it's not, you know, because we train people to treat us by our actions. So if we're always saying yes and always raising our hands and doing the grunt work, we're just going to keep getting that.
Irene, I think you had some perspectives too.
Well, mine's just sort of like, maybe it comes as a result of a career that, you know, I've definitely paid my dues. But when I said, if you get to the point where you know that it's not you, it's them, it took me years to figure that out.
Yeah.
And I said, you know, if the time is right, if you've made plans for it, someday I'll tell you my plans when I left my firm. I mean, it took months of strategy, but the bottom line is, it's so simplistic. Figure out what you love to do, and then figure out a way to get paid for it. We are not leaves in the wind. We can create our own happiness. It may take steps. It may take testing the water. It may take a little sliding back a little bit, but I'm a Capricorn, right? I'm a mountain goat. At the top of the mountain, I keep climbing. I might slide back a little bit, but I keep climbing. And that in and of itself builds confidence. As you well know, no one can give you confidence. You have to do it. You have to earn it. And that's what keeps you positive. Also, it need not be a mentor within your firm or necessarily even another attorney. I often found a trusted friend or a special someone to be my sounding board, where I could talk about my hopes and my fears, my insecurities, my frustrations. And then just by talking it out, by venting, I'd say, well, I guess I should do something about it once identified, right? Because the bottom line is you got to do it yourself. No one's going to give you a successful career on a silver platter. You got to earn it, right? And it's just so much more satisfying because we do have a lot more control than we give ourselves credit for.
Yeah, and I second the concept of building your own support system. As Jennifer knows, I mean, I do a lot of activism in the area of both gender and race and racism, and it's a long and windy road. Sometimes you're ahead, sometimes you're 10 steps back. And frankly, you know, if you're not invited to the table, my idea was just build your own table.
Yeah.
If there's no door, like saw a window into the wall, find a way, like be like water, find a way. Don't take no for an answer.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it was no on Monday, but maybe it becomes a yes Friday afternoon, you know? So you just keep trying. But I have, through this journey, built networks of people who are similarly interested, similarly minded, and that support system is just so important for your own mental health.
Absolutely. We all need to be part of a tribe. You know, we're tribal creatures, and we need each other. And the only way that scientists, if you know, all the articles have shown that we change and grow is through talk therapy, through talking, through just talking to each other. You don't have to have a solution or like a miracle cure, but just this act of talking with all of you, and hopefully those who are listening in the virtual world. It's always heartwarming to me. I always learn something. I always learn a different point of view, which is wonderful. And I hope this has been super helpful.
I agree. Vivian, I'll give you the last word. Any final comments or anything?
That's a lot of pressure, but
you can do it.
I know. So the one thing that gives me lots of peace of mind sometimes is I found that if I look at my job as just one facet of my life, just as my job, right? I mean, I like my job and it is fulfilling to some extent, but I think in the very beginning, I tried to make this into a, it has to be my passion in life, like my job, and so that's how I'm going to get fulfilled. And I have at some point realized that that isn't necessarily true for me, and I'm okay with that. I think I'm good at my job, and I have spent a sufficient amount of hours in doing my job, but at some level it's just my job, and so it's just one facet of what I'm doing with myself. And so to me, that gives me a lot of peace, and it helps my resiliency when something bad happens at work. It's just work, and so I can kind of lean on the other support systems that I have to do that. And so all of that to say that I think there's a lot of different paths to getting past the bamboo ceiling, or finding success at your job, and however you define what success means to you. So we encourage you to do that and to join AABA.
That's right. AABA is like the ready-built network, and also a place for you to practice public speaking skills, as Joan said. You're in a safe environment. So thank you once again for these amazing women who are willing to be brave, be vulnerable, share their collective, 200 years of experience. So thank you so much for sharing that with us. And of course, thank you to the Women's Committee for bringing this programming to you. And then tomorrow, actually, we have a hate crimes prosecution CLE, if you're interested, also held by AABA. So if you haven't joined, please join. Thank you, everyone. Hope you found the panel.
Thank you.
Take care.
Good night.
Good night.